Welcome. Ellen Minetto is absent. Diane Nicolette here. Joe Rodriguez.
No, he will not be able to make it as it turned out. He
Okay.
just notified us.
Thank you. Beth Smith.
Here.
Angela Taylor.
I'm here.
All right, we have a quorum.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk, and welcome to your first Board Policy Committee meeting, Trustee Mayberry.
Thank you.
You're doing some counting, you're good?
I'm all by myself.
Yeah, no, because Ellen was supposed to be here and she's not here. Jill, your seat is actually over there, but at least we have somebody on the side for now.
Thank you.
All right, well, welcome. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with agenda item 2.01, approval of the minutes of the October 19th, 2021 meeting of the Board Policy Committee. Asking for the pleasure of the board as it comes down to agenda item 2.01.
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Church. Is there a second? Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? All right, the motion carries. Let the record show that it is unanimous. All right, we're gonna go on to agenda item 2.02. I see staff moving into position. This is discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or for the proposed revisions, to Board Policy 5100, student behavior, specifically to update formatting, clarify language, and reflect current practices to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And I see before us our staff. Now I'm going to start with you, Dr. Lamarca.
Thank you, President Taylor, Superintendent McNeil, members of the board. For the record, Paul Lamarca, Chief Strategies Officer. We weren't exactly sure who could be here today, so you got all three of us. So we're going to spend about an hour on this particular policy. Yeah, that was a joke.
Yeah, no, I was saying to myself, oh, really? Okay. Hey, stranger things have happened, so look.
We'll give you 5 and we'll take 5 back. How about that? Is that a fair deal? No. I just want to say a couple of contextual things. This particular policy is aligned to really all of our goals as a strategic plan, but 2 in particular, goal 5 and goal 1, safe and supportive school climate and student achievement. You're going to hear several policies from our office today. All those talk about this nexus between climate and student achievement, in particular this one. There are some substantive changes to Nevada revised statute in the last 2 sessions, really affecting student discipline and behavior. For example, this is the onset of restorative practices. And so the behavior manual that the board approved in October, you sent that along, is seen by the State Department of Education as the district's restorative plan, discipline plan. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. We will be coming back to the board in small group briefings at your request, probably mid-spring semester, to talk about that manual in detail in preparation for the following school year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tristan McElhaney and Trish Schaefer.
Sure. Tristan McElhaney, Director of Student Behavior and Student Supports for the district. When we looked through this policy, the main things that we felt needed to happen were to change or to ensure that the language that we've been using contextually in the district was also reflected in the documentation, mainly around restorative practices, some of the changing from justice to practice, just ensuring that we're consistent with what our messaging is. Additionally, and the only other really thing I have is that the term significant suspension was added to the policy. That is from the last legislative session, which codified that a significant suspension is a suspension of 3 days or more. Other than that, most of this is cleaning up language to reflect practice.
And I think it's important that you that we
Tricia, identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Trish Schaefer. I support MTSS, social emotional learning, restorative practices, and behavioral health and management for the school district. I think it's important that we note the change in the significant suspension is 3 days compared to 10. And also that part of this allows us to go out and work with the school staff, the family, and the student to determine what's going on that is causing multiple significant suspensions and what will be the consequence of that, but importantly too, what is the need that is not being met by the student? So what skills is the student missing? And or are there other barriers that the school can address to help prevent recidivism?
Okay, that's great. Questions, any questions, comments on this policy as we consider, I think, are you leaning in, trustee Church? No, are you,
Yes.
yes, okay, and then I'll go to Dr. Nicolette.
Okay, I kind of, caught off guard because I was trying to prep my questions, but so bear with me just 1 second.
You want to go to Dr. Nicolette first while you
Sure,
grab that?
sure.
Why don't we go to Dr. Nicolette to give you time to get together?
All right, thank you. I think this is a comprehensive policy, and I appreciate your work. And I truly appreciate the attempt to move from restorative justice to practices. The word justice is still in there.
Yes,
So, okay, so you already know that.
I saw it. Yes.
Okay, great. And then help me understand on page 1, number 2, that's loco in parentheses. So it only refers to in-transit buses. And there is another spot in the policy that refers to when the student is basically at school. So why is number 2, that definition worded that way? Because it just seems to represent transportation.
Thank you for the question. I'll attempt to answer it, and maybe we can get some support from a friend. I think it's implicit that we have local parentis when children are within the school building during the school day. And really, this extended definition is just to point out that essentially, as a child is on their way to school and on their way home from school, we still retain some of those responsibilities. That is something in the area of student behavior that regularly comes up, because a child might be bullied on the way to school, or a child might get into a fight on the way home. And so there are often questions regarding who's responsible for that. So rule of thumb, the hour prior to school as the child is making their way to, and an hour afterwards, so long as they don't make a stop on the way home, we retain some of that responsibility as a guardian.
Okay, so to clarify my thinking, this is like an in addition to clarify that really when they're in our care, whether it's on a bus or in the classroom, et cetera, we have a responsibility.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nicolette. You ready now, trustee
I
Church?
think I am. Yeah. Basically, I was kind of hoping for a overall who, what, why, when, how of what this policy is all about and why it's different than the last. And I know you did it briefly, but not just for myself, but for the audience members. As I read it, number one, I don't understand restorative justice. I've looked up some other definitions. And so I don't understand what that says and what that means. And
You want to pause and
Sure,
answer questions as we
sure.
go? Because I think you're kind of building and kind of creating a, so why don't we start with, we see that right there, number 4?
Yep.
On page 1, it kind of talks a little bit to what it refers to. And then from there, trustee Church, you can see where you're lost.
Okay, so I'm going to quote Nevada Revised Statute 392.4644 that came from 2019 legislation and how we define restorative practices in Nevada. We have first to provide restorative disciplinary practices, which include without limitation, number 1, holding a pupil accountable for his or her behavior. Number 2, restoration or remedies related to the behavior of the pupil. Number 3, relief for any victim of the pupil. And number 4, changing the behavior of the pupil.
okay, now I see that restorative practice under 7.6 in the policy. And then what you quoted from the NRS is similar but different.
Mhm.
Can you explain that? And then it didn't really address restorative justice.
Restorative justice and restorative practices are used synonymously or interchangeably. We choose to use restorative practices in our district because it is not just about a disciplinary infraction. It is a way in which we create community and a sense of belonging for all of our students. So it's a series of practices versus one isolated incident when a significant harm or disciplinary infraction has occurred.
Okay, I'm a little unprepared because for this. So I'm not
That's
being
okay.
critical. I'm just trying to work my way through it.
Yeah.
So my question to myself or to you is, shouldn't we have the definition be restorative practice and not restorative justice under number 4?
Yes, and I believe that that was what Dr. Nicolette pointed out. And yes, trustee Church, we are in agreement there.
I guess I was so busy prepping, I didn't catch that. And then can you just kind of give me maybe take 5 minutes or so if you need to, but number one, I understand this is mandated by NRS.
Mhm.
And then is this going to be changed again in the near future? You said you were going to have small group meetings. Is this what we're,
No,
Gonna
that
have-
was actually the small group meetings are something that came up. I see your light. Go ahead, Doctor. They're not the same thing.
So thank you for the question, trustee Church. Actually, I believe you were the trustee who sort of prompted a request to us to discuss with the board in more detail the behavior manual. This is that document is this document. So you as a board approved our use of this and we submitted this to the state. This is our restorative discipline plan for the school district. But to your point, at the earlier meeting, there's a lot of detail in here, and this was a consent item. So we are going to talk about this document with you in the future in more detail. School's already underway. This document is already being used, but we will collect that information and as relevant, make changes for the following school year. So that's what I was referencing there.
But that's for that. That's not for this policy.
so just again, maybe take 3 or 4 minutes and just tell us, or tell me anyway, and maybe the audience, what is the bottom line on this? Is this, again, I think the fear of some of the people that wrote me, and I did forward that for the record, that it pushed discipline aside in favor of, for lack of a better word, the offender or perpetrator, and then puts them back in the classroom where maybe they should be not in the classroom. That's the public concern. So can you kind of address that?
Well, I'll start and then Ms. Schaefer.
And
Mr.
let me
McElhaney.
just create a little context, if I may, right? In that, I think what you may do, because I hear things as well, right? Is take them to the definition of restorative practice. And number 1 on restorative practice was holding the offender. Okay, those aren't the quite words that you use, Ms. Schaefer, but that's, so I think if you take that piece, that will answer that concern. It's a real concern, but it talks about it. I think if you take that piece, that will answer the what is this? That answers it.
Thank you for that. And that's the most succinct way to say it. Restorative practice is not about not holding kids accountable. If anything, it's to provide more support for victims of offenses. That's its focus. The only other thing that I'll add to President Taylor's comment is, as you know, in this behavior manual, you have a matrix in the back that basically goes through all of what we call major behavioral events. And for any incident, we have prescribed consequences that should occur as a result. We also have prescribed interventions that should result to support a student so that they don't repeat the behavior in the future. So restorative practices is not about it's not about giving kids a break.
Okay, yeah, it's
Mike, can I add real quick?
certainly,
Just wanted to say that sorry, Tristan McElhaney, the restorative practices that we're engaging in, actually, in my opinion, hold the student more accountable because it's not just about them being suspended, taking a break and then coming back to school. It's about trying to find a way to support them through that. So when they come back, they have a way to re-engage rather than just saying, you're done, now you're back. So I feel this policy and our behavior matrix and our philosophies align with that part of restorative practices.
And then, I mean, I care deeply about at-risk kids, as you all probably know. It's something I constantly harp on. So yeah, it's very important that we not throw that kid away just through discipline. And it's a fine line to protecting the victims and the school, because a disruptive kid can be a cancer on the organization if allowed to fester without being addressed. So, and the thing, I guess, I've been here, what, not 10 months, 11 months on the board. This is a 30,000 foot policy, broad policy. And then I'm always afraid of how that's interpreted and comes out, because a couple of times I've seen regulations, and I think, well, that's not really what I thought I intended. So I guess the devil is in the details, and we'll have those small group meetings. My next question, I didn't see in here about police reporting obligations. As a retired police officer, I understand the difference in the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. So let's just say, for example, hypothetically, a student jaywalks and car has to stop and go around him. That would be an example where there might be discipline or restorative practice, but you wouldn't be calling the police going, hey, he jaywalked, write him a ticket. On the other hand, when you get into some misdemeanor type crimes, is there a policy regulation, or does this address when school police or the appropriate authorities would be notified on a criminal behavior?
You're going to get all three of us again. For the record, Trish Schaefer, we've been asked that question many times, and this does not supersede the laws or requirements of our school police department. We have worked with them so they understand the work that we're doing, but they have responsibilities and rights when there's offenses and also to the victims, and this does not supersede any of that.
The only thing I will add, and Ms. Schaefer's accurate, the only thing I will add is what this specifies is the tools that we have to us as administrators. So this is our administrative policy with dealing with discipline. It is not a criminal policy for dealing with discipline.
Yeah.
But shouldn't it maybe say, oh, I see more lights on. I'll defer for now.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Nicolette was next, and then
Thank
Trustee
you.
Smith.
I would like to add that, I too have had to work on understanding this and spoken with quite a handful of teachers and principals and parents. And that's the one point I want to make, is I really appreciate that there is this loop of involvement that's extremely important. And it includes the parent, whether it's a foster parent, a birth parent, the family, which is so important, because we know once those kiddos leave our care and education, they go somewhere, and it's very important to have us working together as a team. And I will say that Trustee Church, I had thought that myself, but this again is a student behavior. It's meant to define how we are going to help students. It's not meant to define, if you break the law, this is what's going to happen. So they're kind of exclusive of each other.
Thank you, Dr. Nicolette. Trustee Smith?
I agree. Thank you, President Taylor. So the concept of restorative practices was new to me, and I had the pleasure in 2020 of shadowing Principal Christopher Kahn at Donner Springs as part of the Principal for a Day. And that was, of course, before this was ever in my future, but I got the opportunity to learn from him in the classroom and actually see this taking place. So what I'm saying is that I feel that the policy is well written. I support it the way that it's presented, with that change on page 1 with swapping out justice for practices. And just to carry on to what Trustee Nicolette was saying, this is meant to be at a higher level, and then we defer our respect and professional authority to how this is all actually carried out. But on a board policy level, I do believe that this is clear, and I do believe that it lays the groundwork for the professionals to then take it from that point. So I do support it with that one change.
Okay, one thing, thank you very much. One thing I will say too, and then I'll be looking for a motion unless there are other questions. is that I do want to make sure that words matter. We all know that. And I don't think we want to call it a discipline issue a cancer. I know that it wasn't necessarily your intention, but I think it's important to say that person, if they don't get the support that they need, right, and I think that's part of and that was the conversation, but I do think it's important to clear that up, that those problems can persist. And then just make it more difficult for that student as well as for the classroom. So I'll go to you, Trustee Mayberry. Gotta get used to saying that. Trustee Mayberry, and then you said you had one more question, Trustee Smith? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. A rookie question here, just under purpose. Struck in, and that every teacher has a right to teach an environment that is free from distractions and disruptions that impede learning. Just want to know why that's being struck in. Is that a redundant language somewhere?
Thank you for that question. Yes, I think in short, I would say that is the case. So there are our goal statements are around safe and secure environments. Very definitely, every teacher is entitled to work in a safe and secure environment. This is a policy regarding student behavior specifically. And so that's sort of a promise that was included that really doesn't apply within this policy. That's why it was taken out. May I make one more comment?
Thank you, Trustee Mayberry. Trying to get, yes, Dr. Lamarca, and then we'll go back to your final question.
Well,
Trustee
and maybe
Church.
this will close the loop on this. So I appreciate the question. If you have time to look at the Nevada Revised Statute and the chapter that we reference, you're going to see the connection between criminal and administrative requirements. The policy is a requirement. We have a requirement through statute to write this policy. Then at the behavior manual level, you will also see that connection, and that connection is hand in glove. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Dr. Lamarca. Trustee Church?
And just very briefly for time, can you explain what a student might expect if they were subject to this policy? In other words, we have counseling, we have expulsion, suspensions. I understand we have I believe it's called Innovations, which is a special school for disciplinary issues.
No, actually, no, it isn't. No, this is not.
That will then explain, yeah, if you could clear.
So you might be referring to the Washoe Inspire Academy.
Inspire.
Okay. So you're asking a question that we will definitely cover in the small group briefings, because you're really covering a lot of ground with that. But and I encourage you to read the manual, and I know it's long, but especially the matrix, it might help explain some of that. So let's say a student gets themselves into a fight, and it's the first time that has ever occurred. So we do prescribe, and a principal always can use their own professional judgment and sort of deviate from what is prescribed. But by and large, we prescribe the things that might occur. This might include like a parent conference. It might include a conference with the victim and the offender. It might include suspension for a couple of days. It will require a school to provide sort of a support plan on how are we going to address this behavior in the future. If that student were to reoffend, get into a second fight, that might require some of those same steps. The suspension might be longer. If over a significant period of time, and this is defined in law, the student is habitually a disciplinary problem, that could lead to a potential interim alternative education setting placement. That's what you're referring to in terms of Inspire. There are also some acts that statute requires an immediate movement. So for example, if a student brought a gun to a school, and they're a general education student, they're going to be required to be removed for a 180-day school period. So again, it's very complicated, but if you go through the matrix, I think for any particular event, you will see the things that we recommend in terms of consequences, as well as the things we recommend in terms of interventions.
Thank you, Dr. Lamarca. I think in a nutshell, there is no cut and dry. Student does this, they get that, and that, and that. So, you know, there's the professional opinion of the principal, those who are involved, with other types of things. But I tell you what, I think you'll find that matrix very helpful. That may help. A black and white is a little easier, it's a little more linear, but because kids aren't black and white, so to speak, right? It gets a little bit more complicated than that. Looking for another question?
I just wanted to make a comment, if I may. And thank you, General Counsel, for reminding us that on page 5, there is a paragraph about how district police will be involved. But again, this policy is about the process, restorative practices with a little tidbit there about, yes, the police have a role.
All right, thank you very much. If there are other questions for staff, certainly we want to take them. Otherwise, I'm looking for a motion to move this forward with the correction. I'm sorry. Oh, do we have public comment? Thank you very much.
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you. You can always remind me of that loudly because I don't, no, dude, I appreciate you being so respectful. I appreciate that, but no, because that's important. And if I miss that, then certainly feel free. Thank you.
All
But your
right.
light is on, so you're leaning in?
Yep, I am. Beth Smith for the record. I move that the Board Policy Committee forwards the proposed revision of Board Policy 5100, student behavior, to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval with the change on page 1, definition 4, restorative justice to restorative practice.
Thank you very much, Trustee Smith. Is there a second?
There is, with just a quick friendly,
Okay, so there's a second first.
yeah, second,
Okay, go ahead.
with, just to reference page 5, F, it says restorative discipline, and that should say restorative practice, to keep it consistent.
Hi, for the record, it's Trish Schaefer. I believe that was intentional, coming out of the law where we have our restorative discipline plans, which is the manual and the matrix that we present. And
Okay,
it talks
thank you.
about the way in which we do discipline compared to a zero tolerance policy.
Okay, and I should have brought that up earlier. I'm sorry. So a second without a friendly.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? All right, the motion carries. Let the record
Thank
show
you.
it is. Thank you very much. Thanks, team. It is 5-0. We're going to go on to agenda item 2.03. This is discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 5105, student uniforms, adoption of a site-based policy specifically to update formatting and clarify language to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And I'm going to turn it over to, I think, Deputy Byersdorf.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Taylor. President Taylor, Superintendent Dr. McNeil, and trustees, thank you. I'm joined today by Project Manager Extraordinaire Vanjie Russell. And then to Vanjie's right is our lead area superintendent, Lauren Ford. So yes, we are here today to present proposed changes to Board Policy 5105, student uniforms. And I wanted to, before I turn it over to Vanjie, just a couple of comments. This policy was last revised in March of 2019. And the proposed changes that we're bringing to the policy committee today include editorial corrections, formatting changes in order to conform with adopted board policy, and removal of language that is more appropriate, we believe, in an administrative regulation that we are concurrently working on at this time as well. So, and then also wanted to point out, it has been an effort, and behind us, we have academics, accountability, Office of School Leadership as well that have provided input as well. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Vanjie Russell.
Vanjie Russell for the record. So the responsible office is actually the Office of School Leadership. They are charged with ensuring that this policy supports the direction of the Board of Trustees via the superintendent. And because of that, I am going to turn it over to our lead area superintendent, Lauren Ford.
For the record, Lauren Ford, Area Superintendent. You'll notice that throughout this policy, there are things that are strucken out, right? We feel that those are more appropriate for regulation than to be in this policy. The board policy should be overarching, as we've stated. Keep in mind that we do have to update regulations based upon this policy, right? And as this is happening moving forward with the Board of Trustees, we will be working on those regulations. When we work on a regulation, we do work with our office, the deputy superintendent, before we present them to the superintendent. So that is an ongoing process. With this policy, we do meet with principals and we do have meetings set aside, for example, in January, we'll meet with all principals that are affected by this policy and run through the next steps with them and how to involve the community in the work that they do. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if there are any, first of all, any public comment on this one, the uniforms? Please go ahead, Jean.
Mike Burns.
I have some props.
It's Burns, sir?
Yes.
Burns, welcome, Mr. Burns.
Hi. Okay, so first I want to apologize to the Ms. Beiersdorf, Ms. Ford, and Ms. Russell, and especially them and the board for my email last Friday. So I wrote something, in case anyone's wondering, I was wrong, and I claimed something that wasn't right. So after saying that, okay, so I got some props so you guys can kind of. Okay, while writing my apology yesterday, I did come up with a concern. Let me explain. First of all, I really like the background information to the agenda item details, specifically where it says removal of administrative regulation references to conform with adopted board policy convention. So that's this. As an example, the current draft proposal 4A says sale of student uniforms as a fundraising opportunity is prohibited. This was adopted on June 24th, 2014. Also, one of the current draft proposals I wrongly stated as being deleted was adopted on June 24th, 2014 as well. It is the current draft proposal 9, which states the implementation of student uniforms at a specific school site must adhere to the parameters set forth through this board's accompanying administrative regulation. This provision has been deleted, which is a very good thing in my opinion. This is because that provision, which has been active since 2014, gives all power to the superintendent. And by the way, when I say the superintendent, I'm not referring to Superintendent McNeil, it's just a general superintendent. Because, I'll read that again, it gives all power to the superintendent because uniform policy must adhere to the administration regulation. This gives the superintendent the authority to override any board decisions. Here's an example. Administrative Regulation 8AI was adopted on January 11th, 2018. This provision states any increase in the cost of the uniform for the purpose of school fundraising must be voluntary, clearly communicated to the parent guardian, and comply with the district student activity procedures. Even though board policy states selling uniforms as a fundraiser is prohibited, that becomes null and void when board policy also says uniform policy must adhere to the administrative regulation. The transfer of power from board policy to administrative regulation was further demonstrated with the adoption of Guiding Practices Provision H on March 12, 2019. This provision states the superintendent may develop any regulations.
I'm sorry, Mr. Burns, your time is up, sir. If there are more you would like to say at the end of the meeting, we'll have another public comment period.
Yeah, I'll finish then.
When you can finish then, okay? Thank you, sir. Jeannie, any other public comment? Enough of this, okay, thank you. Okay, we'll bring it back here to the board, then for discussion. If there are any at all, you see there were some editorial updates and some changes from board policy to moving some things that out of board policy into board regulation, because it's more of the day-to-day. And so we'll look for trustee Church. I see your light on, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, number one, I really appreciate the public comment and the written comment that came before, even though there was a clarification, because thank goodness people are doing their homework, looking over our shoulder, because I can't catch everything with so many policies. So that said, can somebody discuss that conflict between the sale of uniforms and any other conflicts that the gentleman mentioned? But he did mention, I think it was 5105 2DI, the sale of student uniforms as fundraising is prohibited.
Okay, I'll start out and then Vanjie and Lauren can help out as well. So the concern, trustee Church, specifically about the sale of uniforms as a fundraiser, the concern would be that families who may not be able to engage in the fundraiser, just a general unfairness that might happen when a uniform is required at the school site. So let me explain a little bit more. So we may have clubs or athletic teams or others, classrooms that do fundraisers, and maybe to raise funds for materials in the classroom, let's just say. And it's not mandatory that everybody partake of the fundraiser or be involved, but when a uniform is required at that school site and it's being used as a fundraiser, we just saw that there was a what's the word, kind of a cross purposes there, that if you're requiring a uniform, the school should not be doing a fundraiser for uniforms as well. As a matter of fact, the school, if a student can't afford a uniform, schools, and that's in our regulations as well currently, must provide a student with a uniform as well. So
I think his question though was, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so go ahead.
So Mr. Burns
Pull
mentioned,
that mic over, please, sir.
Mr. Burns mentioned a conflict with regulation. Does that mean the regulation, since we haven't approved this yet, upon the approval, new regulations would be adopted? Would that be the answer to that question?
Correct. After we adopt this, then we can go look at in depth into all the regulations that need to be. I think a good point too, to add on to what Deputy Superintendent Beiersdorf said, is the purpose of a uniform policy at a school is not for financial benefit. The purpose of the uniform policy should be embedded with the community within the school and their choice to have uniforms, with parent input, community input as to that belief. So having a financial gain, such as, like it stated, we crossed out, would not be the purpose of the policy. Does that make sense?
Let me kind of say where I'm pondering. Some uniforms might be like a uniform like I'm wearing right now for the AACT in my district. Not that I don't like all the others, but little promotion here. So that might be the uniform, correct? Other times, might the uniform say beige slacks and green top or something? Kind of a generic, is that possible?
Yes, correct. The top should be plain. It should not have an insignia on it. And the pants should be designated so that they could be purchased, for example, at a local store.
Right. So what if, again, if they can't afford it, we provide them. But what if they have that rule? And what if the fundraiser says, well, we've got a deal, we're getting a deal through somebody else to help support the fundraiser. We're going to sell it cheaper than Walmart or whoever. Why would we prohibit that?
So as part of the regulation, in here, we do not state specifically where to purchase the uniforms from, correct? So that is left to the regulation. So in the regulation, a school site could have ensured that some company provided the uniforms at a cheaper cost, and that is then given to parents as an option. You can purchase from this company, or you can purchase the uniforms here, but there's multiple options for parents to purchase those uniforms. But we do not call out vendors in this policy. It's a board policy.
So if maybe I could add on just one,
Yes,
sorry,
please,
Dr.
Neil.
McNeil. We expect our schools, as it is in the regulation right now, that they would sell the uniforms to parents at the cost of which the vendor in this case is making that uniform available to the school. So we wouldn't want schools to add on $1, $10, $20, whatever it is for a fundraiser. We don't want to make it prohibitive to our families. We want to have options for our families. so that families can easily access uniforms if their children attend a school that does have a uniform policy in place.
And if I may add, so in your example of if a vendor had a uniform at cost, then the school would be able to participate in that. They're just not going to be making a profit for a fundraiser, that they would be able to take advantage of that less price and not have a fundraiser based around that. So that the school is not making a profit off of the uniform.
Other questions? You're good, trustee Church? That was your question?
I'm not seeing any reinforcement from my fellow trustees, so I guess we're good with that.
Okay. All right. Other questions or comments? If not, we're looking towards a motion. Pleasure of the board, motion. Trustee Smith, I see you leaning in. Thank you, ma'am.
Sure. And also just to clarify before I make the motion, the way that I understand it, trustee Church, is based on the direction we may be about to give. They will go ahead and they will look at the other administrative regulations and get them in alignment with the discussion that we've just had. With that said, item 2.03, I move that the board policy committee forwards the proposed revisions of board policy 5105, adoption of a site-based policy, to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval.
Second,
Thank you very much. We have a motion on the floor from trustee Smith, seconded by Dr. Nicolette. More discussion at all? All right, seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? All right, the motion carries. That the record shows unanimous, which today is 5-0. All right, thank you, staff. On to agenda item 2.04, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 5150. This is student freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and right to assemble, specifically to update formatting and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. All right, who's staff on this one? I was going to say general counsel. Oh, I thought so, but no one came up. I was like, I think it's the general counsel.
Trying to find some notes.
Yeah, he's looking for his notes. Okay.
No, I wasn't. I was looking for notes of something else. Anyway, okay, so this is board policy
5150, yes.
Board policy 5150, student freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and right to assemble. As the board probably recalls, we have rearranged the formatting to be consistent with past adoptions of the board and as adopted in 9100. So most of this is just changing those things around at the beginning anyway, under definitions. Then we have the body of the policy, which discusses student speech and talks about what is protected and what's not. I'll just point out that the policy is consistent with the United States Constitution, as well as the decisions made by the US Supreme Court, Nevada Supreme Court, Nevada law. In fact, for the most part, it's taken out of those different provisions. Nevada does have a special student publication statute, which was adopted 2 sessions ago and has been included in this language at this portion here in paragraph 4. And beyond that, that's about it. This language, there was a lot of extra words in this policy that didn't need to be there and didn't really apply. And so therefore those were removed. And we believe that this is a more succinct policy as it relates to these issues. The other thing that we worked on doing is organizing. So if you could see here, these things in green where it says student dress, this was actually cut and pasted from up here because it didn't fit. It was kind of all over the place. So we tried to outline it.
Tell us where you are.
When I'm talking, I'm referring to on the screen. So
Okay.
this section here, where I'm moving the mouse around and I'll darken these different things, paragraphs.
It's like I'm looking here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know. Okay. So the
I'll-
paragraphs on page 5
Got you. Thank you.
and page 4.
Yes. Green, got you.
So these are in green and they have double strikes. The double strike means that it's just been moved to somewhere else. And so those were cut and pasted down to here, When I say here, I mean page 6,
I got you.
which has the green, and it's paragraph 5, student dress, and then paragraph 6, technology and social media, paragraph 7, religion, and then paragraph 8, patriotic observances. Because the way it was listed before, they had their own subsections of subsections, and it didn't make sense. It wasn't a proper use of the paragraphing system. So we just rewrote it to make it more consistent. And plus, if you follow that system, it makes it better for the end user. So for example, if I'm looking for something related to patriotic observances, there it is. It has its own little section, paragraph 8. If I'm looking for something related to religion, there it is, paragraph 7. If I'm looking for something technology and social media, et cetera. So it was a lot of moving around and a lot of creation of, well, we hope will make it simpler for the end user in the long run. And that's the purpose of most of these changes. And so with that, we're looking for a motion for approval from the Board Policy Committee. Let's call it the Board of Trustees.
Okay, well, we're the board policy committee right now, so thank you, council. Before we begin with some discussion, any public comment on this?
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you. See, I learned well, Beth, thank you. I'm back in the groove, Okay, discussion, looks like the majority of this is moving around. Some things, taking on a few extra words. I think it is important, so thank you for sharing that, council. That a good piece of this is, from federal law, state law, and case law in our state. I think it's important to make sure we're consistent there as well. So looking for questions, comments from the board at this point? Trustee Church, your lights on?
I'll start again. Page 2, now section 5, formerly 3, unprotected speech. I have an email from I don't know if he's a current lawyer or retired lawyer, but he had some concerns about vagueness, as do I. Because it says may include, but not necessarily limited to. So we've kind of said, well, this could be, but it could be more. And then I kind of get it that we can't define obscene words and pictures in every single broad policy, but maybe we can get some comments on if this is too vague. And I do have a specific comment on section C.
A 5 under 5?
5C, yes. It would seem to limit a free speech, whether it's in the classroom as part of an assignment or whether it's at a meeting or a debate club or whatever, where you say, I think 18-year-olds should be able to drink. They did it in New York, they did it here. Or if you're in the military, you should be, if you carry a gun, you should be able to at least have a drink, not at the same time. Or, what's wrong with smoking cigarettes? I think it's okay. I think that marijuana should be legal for 18 and above. Do you get my gist that they're expressing an opinion that's contrary to what most of us believe, but wouldn't they have a right to that opinion?
We'll look to council for that. Thank you, Trustee Church.
Well, to be clear, I don't say anything. This is language that you adopted. That's in black. So that's already the way it exists currently today. That being said, I obviously wouldn't suggest something that's in violation of the Constitution. And the reason why it says may include, but is not necessarily limited to, is the exact example that you give. This may be inappropriate and therefore unprotected speech, or it may not be, depending on the circumstance. So you just gave the perfect example to answer your own question. The reason why speech which has a pro-alcohol, tobacco, and or controlled or illegal substances message is on there is because there's a specific US Supreme Court case that permits school districts to prevent students from wearing pro-alcohol, pro-tobacco, and or controlled or illegal substances on their clothing, and or having such messaging throughout the school. That being said, if it was part of a curriculum, then it may not necessarily be unprotected speech. So
or of a debate class. I'm sorry
right,
to interrupt, but
right.
that was an example.
Yeah.
Let's have one side pro tobacco, one side anti-tobacco. Let's do a
Exactly.
debate thing. That's why the may is important.
Right. So,
And
but-
that's the law. Yeah.
yeah, but it's directly out of the case. And so just, and I think that's the case for all of this. There are certain circumstances where it's probably okay. well, probably not perjury or blackmail, but nonetheless.
We bar a few things. Okay. Thank you for that. Were you following up to that?
Yeah,
Trustee
I'll
Churcher?
just read into, it's only one sentence, what the individual wrote me, and I share his sentiments. My main concern is with the definition of unprotected speech. The example words in subparagraph A lack precise meanings as written. They are up to the subjective interpretation of the person enforcing the policy. And I have to kind of agree with that the way I read this, somebody wanted to.
Did your mic's off?
Yeah, I'd have to agree that if somebody wanted to start a debate on whether 18-year-olds should be able to purchase marijuana, the way I read that, I'm like, oh, no, you stop, you can't do that. Can we get a comment or opinions? I see a red light on.
Well, okay.
I guess my,
We're gonna, hang on just a
Well,
second.
it sounds like your sentence is dealing with paragraph A, so you're in paragraph C.
Right, I was just gonna say that from a clarity standpoint, you jumped to so paragraph A, if I may, so you're getting responses based upon where your question is. Your question began with the subjectivity that may be involved in paragraph A. And then you end it with should they be able to wear something on their clothes, which is C.
We'll have a
So-
debate. My point is, the gentleman basically was concerned about vagueness, and
So
that's-
just over, so you basically. just
Overall vagueness.
Okay, are you gonna respond to the vagueness piece? Because we'll just because I think you're going in a different direction, trustee, maybe, or no?
I'm sorry, say again.
Are you in the same, are you going to a different topic in this
No,
or are you
a separate.
separate? So I'll put you on hold. just-
Similar, but separate.
Okay.
I can wait. I can
So
wait.
hold, so we
No,
can-
Please.
Thank you very much. Trustee Smith?
so I have a follow-up question for you, trustee Church. With A, specifically, which of these words do you feel is vague? Just so that I can dial right into the part that you specifically think is vague. Because, things like defamation, libel, and slander has a pretty straightforward definition. Same thing with child pornography. So I'm curious, which of these is the vague part? So I can follow along.
Sure, and I did. I meant to cover that, and I didn't. I got off track. Libel and slander. I mean, that's the old misinformation. One person's misinformation is another person's truth. I don't think libel and slander are quite as clear cut as fighting words or obscenity. Sometimes it's an opinion.
No, libel and slander have a specific legal definition. Libel is the written word that is false about a person that's published to a third person. Slander, by definition, is a statement that is false, spoken word that is published to a third person. They are legally defined. So you can take it out. It's your language. That's actually literally holdover language, but it is specifically defined in the law, both terms. And defamation is a catch-all for slander and for libel.
Thank you, counsel. We'll go to trustee Mayberry then.
Thank you, Madam President. And I want to compliment the general counsel on this. This is a really good discussion. It's a great civic lesson. Just two questions. I may have answered it. We talk a little bit, we define social media and then unprotected speech. Would speech by a student who maybe goes off on a rant on their teacher or their principal on a Facebook page or Snapchat, would that be, on their own time, in their own home, would that be protected?
Boy, that is a good question. And that's probably, it depends on who you ask. If you ask Facebook, they would say it is. So
Yeah.
I think what we're stumbling into on that frame is it would not be protected because you would be bringing that back to the school. So if I am posting on my Facebook site that teacher X is the worst teacher in the world, and I post, let's say, a threat, that would be a workplace issue, and it would be incumbent upon us to look into that, and that would not be protected speech. However, if, and this is the cheerleader case, that was just decided by the Supreme Court in a 9-0 decision. If I am sharing that to only those who are invited to see my post.
Yeah, friends.
And yeah, friends, and it's not brought back to the school, then it's probably protected. It really is a case by case
Okay.
basis. I can't give you a bright line, which again furthers the point of why you need to have may and be, but is not necessarily limited to. It just depends. Bullying is the one that I'm sure everyone who's listening to this, which I know is so many people, teachers and stuff, that's the tough one, right? I can bully you online, but then once it comes back to the school, now it's a school issue and
Okay,
we
sure,
address it.
sure.
So it's
Okay.
just tough. It's a tough one to answer. A lot of moving parts on that one.
Yeah, I don't have a remedy for that, but I wanted to get that on the record. And then there's nothing in here that prohibits political speech, whether it's somebody wearing a Make America Great Again hat or a Black Lives Matter shirt.
No.
Right?
Students
Not
have,
students.
have a very high level of free speech as long as it doesn't disrupt the education environment. There's a brilliant case written out of the Second Circuit, I believe it's the 11th Circuit, South Carolina, that lays out literally all of these unprotected speeches, but political speech is protected for students. Not the same for staff because they're staff.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Questions, trustee Mayberry? Further questions? Oh, we do have some public comment. We'll take that. Why don't you go?
I just had one more comment. My understanding of this, just for, again, the new trustees in the audience. We're the policy board. This would then go to the board, the board of trustees. If approved, it then goes to,
Goes out for
Public-
public comment for
public
13
comment.
days.
yes.
And
So,
then it will come back to the Board of Trustees after that, to consider those comments, yada, yada. And then so it takes two votes of the board before it
Yes.
becomes actual policy.
yeah, so I'm leaning towards approving this, but if anybody says, oh, you missed this or missed that, this
have
will
two
go out for
opportunities.
public comment.
Yep.
This is not
Absolutely. And
not
then,
the final version.
well, and the whole idea, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, trustee Church. Thanks for the clarification. That shit, I want to make, did you follow that, trustee Mayberry? I want to make sure you're clear on that as well as the public. That's the whole reason for public, for a 13-day public comment period. So that it is sent out, emailed out to, staff, stakeholders, groups and so on, and put in the community so people can see this is a policy this board's looking at, has given preliminary approval to. And then I gives people an opportunity to provide some commentary before we take our final vote. Okay, so good clarification. Thank you, trustee Church. Trustee Mayberry?
How is that distributed? Is that distributed district-wide, or you sign up to receive the
It's
policy?
district-wide. You know the exact mechanisms that superintendent? Good question. Thank you.
No, thank you for the question. And it's actually posted on our website. So when our board services, JJ Batchelder sends those out, they're actually posted so the public can go in and make public comment. And then the board receives all of that public comment back.
And we also get an email that this has gone out, so it goes out across the district as well. Let's have the public comment. I think the board finished with this. Let's have the public comment, Jean.
Shannon Coley.
Welcome, Ms. Coley. Get the mic on. You know the routine. There you go. Thank you. Oh, now it's on. Now it's on. Yes.
I'm just curious about the political speech. It was 1310 and political speech versus this, the policy.
Different policies.
Different policy, and this has to do with students, and they are he just explained a lot of it. So I'm wondering if this is your workaround for BLM and LGBTQ for the students to produce materials, posters. Is this the workaround because they have freedom? So I'm just curious if that is connected because they have much more freedom. And because it's now, if it's spoken, if it's in the curriculum, the kids can talk about it. And I know that was a big thing that General Counsel Rombardo was saying, put it in the curriculum, and then it can be spoken. And then the kids can talk about BLM, make sure it's in the curriculum. So I'm just wondering if this is your workaround.
Thank you, Ms. Coley. As you know, there's not commentary back and forth, but would you like to, I'm happy to have a conversation with you after. Let me give you an easy answer. No. But if they're further on, I'm happy to have a conversation with you after, okay? Any other public comment? All right, so we'll bring it back here to the board. What is the pleasure of the board for, this is board policy 5150, students' freedom of speech. Go ahead, Dr. Nicolette, I see you leaning.
Okay. I move that the Board Policy Committee forwards the proposed revisions of Board Policy 5150, student freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and right to assemble to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval.
Thank you, trustee Nicolette. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I can second that.
It's seconded by trustee Mayberry. Your first second on the record. Just go ahead and make that note, okay? We have already had discussion. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? The motion is carried. Let the record show it is unanimous. Okay, we're gonna go on to agenda item 2.05, discussion and possible action for preliminary adoption of proposed revisions of board policy 5250, alcohol, tobacco, and controlled substances, student prevention and intervention, specifically to update formatting, clarify language, and reflect current practice to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees. This for consideration of preliminary approval. And I think we're starting with you, Dr. Lamarca.
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
President Taylor, Superintendent McNeil, members of the Board Policy Committee. For the record, Paul Lamarca, Chief Strategies Officer, and I'm joined by Eric Olson, who is our Project Aware Administrator, and he's representing our counseling department today. So again, just a couple of contextual statements before Eric talks about the policy. Again, this policy relates to the intersection between school climate and student achievement. I do want to point out again, an access to the behavioral manual. You will find in the behavioral manual some entries regarding violations of this policy and what the consequences and what the interventions might be, and just forewarning or foreshadowing some questions that might occur. I must share that substance use is a significant issue. It's something we take very seriously. We are very pleased that the state of Nevada finally approved our ESSERS 3 grant application. So in short order, we will be attempting to hire a counselor on special assignment that will help sort of centrally with our substance use prevention intervention efforts. We follow YRBS data. We look at our own discipline data, so we know that this is a significant issue. I will tell you that some of the strategies that we have used traditionally have been impacted by the COVID pandemic. We've had a difficult time meeting in person with some of the interventions that we do use with students and families, but we do hope to sort of bring those back and sort of create a better opportunity for families through some regional programming. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric to talk more specifically about the policy.
Good afternoon, Eric Olson, Counseling and Social Work Department, Project Aware Coordinator. I would echo what Dr. Lamarca said. This is largely some restructuring, some reformatting of the policy language. I don't personally see real substantive changes. What I see with this revision is really reaffirming the district's commitment that this is a priority area. I think we all know how devastating drug, marijuana, alcohol, other controlled substances can be for our students, how much it can impact school climate, school safety. So I really just see this as kind of tightening up language and making it more consistent with current policy structure while continuing to reaffirm this as a priority. But I'd be happy to answer questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. We'll go straight to public comment first on this.
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. See if there's any commentary from the board. If not, we'll look for a motion. Again, this is primarily looks like a lot of editorial changes on this to make things consistent, which is why we have this on the rotation. So we're always looking at board policies along the way. Trustee Church, you want to begin?
Thank you. There's a chart that I believe it's Washoe County School District chart that comes from, I believe it's called JTNN, but it lists, and it's 2019, and it deals with marijuana use in the last 30 days in the high schools, and it's self-reported. This is admitted, so this is probably low. 22.6%. Are you aware of that graph?
Actually, that might be an underreport. So I think what JTNN is referencing is a YRBS data youth risk behavior survey, which is conducted on a random basis within the school district. I don't have that in front of me, but I do think actually the rate in the past 30 days when that was taken may have been a little bit higher, but yes, we are aware of that.
It might even be higher than the 22%.
Might be.
Okay, and that's big. I mean, that's marijuana. So we don't know self-reporting on cocaine or methamphetamine or anything else.
In fact, we do. Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead. No,
you.
absolutely.
So the YRBS covers several substances. So there is information, self-report information, which is best used as surveillance data over time. But you will find student comments regarding alcohol use, marijuana use, tobacco use, access to vaping, cocaine and other substance uses. And yes, I think that that's very important for us to continue to follow that. And as we stated at the beginning, this is a significant issue. Let me add one just soapbox comment. This is a significant issue that needs to be addressed. What we find typically and almost always is that the use of these substances is a coping mechanism. It's often a signifier of other issues that are affecting the student, whether those be personal or familial. And so while we have to address this particular behavior, we also need to address those underlying behaviors. So again, I would actually refer you to the behavior manual in that sense of or for context. Thanks.
Thank you. And I did find that other one, it was actually 27%, 27.4. So you're right, it's higher than the 22. There was also a study, and I can't find it right at my fingertips, from staff, mainly teachers, that they thought that at the high school level, the use of drugs on a moderate level, I think the term was moderate, was over 50%. Are you aware of that?
I am not aware of that particular statistic. What I can tell you is when we, and Eric may have a comment, if traditionally, when you look at major event data within the school district, violence is the #1 major event, but the second category is substance use, but it is not at the rate that you're describing in terms of kids getting caught.
Trustee Church, is this, you bringing this back to the policy, sir, or?
Yes, it is, because my whole point is that I believe we need to have at least a section in there that allows drug testing. In other words, a section that allows the superintendent at his or her discretion to implement some form of drug testing. It's not covered at all, and I think it should.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Church. Dr. Nicolette?
I just want to quickly say, Trustee Church, when you present some evidence, I think it was 50% teachers, I'd really like to be able to look at that so that I can see exactly what you're talking about.
Looking forward now.
Thank you, Dr. Nicolette. I think it's important to keep the record straight, because otherwise the 50% number is out there on the record as though that's true. And I think it's important when we're saying, especially from this table, I think it's really important that we're accurate. So I'm just going to ask each of us, all of us do that from time to time. Each of us is let's make sure we're accurate tonight, because that sends an important message one way or the other.
Can I comment quickly on that too?
Please, Mr.
It's actually a very important principle that we talk about in prevention. We call it a perceived norm. So despite what the actual statistics might be, what is the perception?
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if I went onto a high school campus and I said, how many of your peers are using marijuana? I would often hear 90 or 100%, which is not true, but it's the perceived norm, which actually is a risk factor for increased substance use.
Which is why it's important to get that. So a perceived norm, that's a very different number than what the actuality or self-reported data is. Again, I think just important to be accurate. Trustee, Superintendent, then we go back to you, Trustee Church.
Thank you, President Taylor. And Dr. Marker, just to clarify, the JTNN information, the YRBS is actually Washoe County
Right.
school, Washoe County data.
Correct. Yes. I actually thought about that earlier and forgot to mention this. It's Washoe County, and they're looking at various ages, not just Washoe County School District. That's an important, I thought about that, and I should have written it down because I forgot to say it. All right, you have another question,
Yeah,
comment, trustee
I'll have
Church?
to go back to that one, but I believe that was specific to Washoe County, but I did find what I was referring to, and it is very specific. Washoe County School District Staff Perceptions.
Mhm.
It's the JTNN study. It's dated 2014 to 2020, and the 2020, and it's a graph chart, but it's above 50%. It looks like it's maybe 51%. And the quote is, figure 50, teachers and staff that perceive substance abuse use among high school students to be moderately or very common.
Mhm.
And that, so that is very specific to Washoe County. And I trying to find a page number. and
Well,
then
I think you gave the reference. I think it's important to know that's a perceived norm.
Page 38.
Yeah, I think that the key thing there is that's a perceived norm. And I think the perceived norm, based upon what Mr. Olson just shared with us, might be very, very much higher. At least on what that's a teacher's perception. That's not observed norm, by the way. You think that's a perceived norm.
And it's also a perception of, is this a concern, which absolutely it is,
Mhm.
as opposed to how many students are
Yeah.
using.
And I think that part of it certainly is, I think it's a good thing. We certainly, I think we're all concerned about it. I think it's important, as much as I'm saying, I think it's important because, and I've been really recommitting myself and like for all of us do that, to let's make sure that accurate information is coming from this table. At the same time, it's not that we're saying, oh, well then shoot, it's 27%, not over 50, so we're good. I mean, it's still something to pay attention to. You know, as you started, Dr. Lamarcus, it's a significant concern we should have in that direction. But I think it's a different message when you're saying about 27% versus over 50%. And I think it's important. I think it's important. So. Other trustee Church.
Yeah, just for the record, I think my comments were accurate. That one was Washoe County. The other one was high school for Washoe County. Yes, that could include Minogue High School, but I think it clearly reflects on us. And I'll just put on the record for anybody that wants to look it up. It's called JTNN, Joint Together Northern Nevada Comprehensive Community Prevention Plan for Washoe County, 2020 to 2022. And so you could find that, and you could find that, you know, Googling or online or through that organization.
No, I think that's important. It's good that the study, they send that out. I actually saw the same thing. And I think trustee Church, I think you shared that with our colleagues when it came out shortly after you joined the board. But I do think even the name of the report says Washoe County. So I think that's important. And that means charters. That means homeschool. That means all of those students. So, but it still doesn't mean it's not a number for us to pay attention to. I think it is noteworthy. I just think it's important for us to be accurate, know what we're dealing with. And 27% is still something you want to pay attention to, which is why we have this policy.
If I may comment just very quickly, trustee Church has mentioned JTNN a couple of times, and you'll recall we presented with JTN several months back. They are a strong partner of ours. They provide in-services at our schools. They do a very good job as one of our partners. This is a community issue. We have other partners. Quest Counseling is a strong partner within our county. They do some support for our students at differing schools. And we actually have a partnership with them because they have an inpatient program and we provide some educational support for them. Children's Cabinet provides support for students. So this is a community-wide issue. It's a significant issue. We take it very seriously, and we are only going to solve it with our partners.
And we're certainly grateful for them. And I certainly think it's appropriate to have a policy around it to indicate that as a board, we think it's an important issue. Trustee Mayberry.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you very much. Just want to stay very general. Want to stay general with the policies. Want to make sure that I'm aligned with what we're doing. This is a policy on alcohol, tobacco, controlled substances, et cetera. We address the substances in here, the controlled substances, tobacco, alcohol, et cetera. We talk about prevention, support, but the details are in or elsewhere. This is sort of an overall umbrella policy. Is that accurate?
That is an accurate statement. I do think I would make reference again to our behavior manual. And I know that you're brand new to the
Yes.
board. With permission, we'll make sure that we get you a link so that you can find that very
Okay.
easily at our website. There is some specific detail regarding how we respond in cases of substance use.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And while you're sending that, since we're having conversation, our small groups will be coming up. So if we can get a link to that when we're invited to those small groups, just to remind all of us
Absolutely. Thank you.
as well, we can refamiliarize ourselves with it as well. Other questions, comments? Otherwise, looking for a motion if that's the pleasure of the board?
Okay. I move for item 2.05 that the board policy committee forwards the proposed revision of board policy 5250, alcohol, tobacco, and controlled substance, student prevention and intervention, to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval.
Thank you, trustee Smith. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Seconded by trustee Mayberry. Further discussion,
One quick comment.
please.
I'm going to be a no because kids can't learn when they're stoned. I think it's a major, major problem in the school district. And I think at the 30,000-foot level, there should be some reference to guidance to the superintendent for drug testing.
Thank you, trustee Church. Further comments? Okay, I'm hearing none. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Opposition?
Nay.
The motion passes 4-1, 4-1. Okay, why don't we take a quick 10 minutes? Quick 10-minute break and then come on back. We have 3 more policies. We'll continue from there. Thank you, everybody. 2 more. Is it 2? Oh, yeah, 2. Oh, yeah, 2. Okay, just quick 10 minutes. All right. No, we're gonna take, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do 206 and we'll take care of that and get to 207. All right, gentlemen, thank you. We're back in session. Reconvening, we're gonna go to agenda item 2.06. Discussion and possible action for preliminary adoption of proposed revisions of board policy 5300, student activity, specifically to update formatting, clarify language, and reflect current practice to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees. This is for consideration of preliminary approval. And I believe we're going to start with you, Dr. Lamarca.
Thank you, President Taylor, Superintendent McNeil, members of the Board Policy Committee. For the record, Paul Lamarca, Chief Strategies Officer. Again, just some very brief context. This policy, again, is at that nexus between school climate and student achievement. We know that when students feel like they belong to a school, and when they have strong relationships with people at the school, they perform better academically. Activities is one of the chief ways in which we can accomplish that. So with that short statement, I'll turn it over to Roland Stallworth.
Good afternoon, Roland Stallworth, the Coordinator of Activities and Athletics for the Washoe County School District. And again.
And the president of the NIAA.
Oh, and
Just
yeah,
wanted
you
to
can add that as well.
put that in there, okay?
The key thing here is just a change in the format to make them all consistent and the same, and that's kind of what the district has done and with legal. So we appreciate the effort that was done there. As you go through this process here, there are really no major changes in this policy. What it does do, though, I think, is provides a little bit more teeth for individual schools to have the ability to provide an array of various activities and clubs for their campus and for their students. So with that being said, you'll see that they did add the definition of extracurricular and intracurricular activities and distinguished those two and how they interact on campus with the activities and the programs that are provided. And I think the other major change that you could look at with this would be, I want to say on page 3, 4E or 4 at the bottom there in green where it says the board hereby directs the superintendent to adopt an administrative regulation to implement and maintain the purpose of this board policy. And that would provide some consistency as far as the leadership is concerned as we go through the implementation and the control and leadership of individual clubs and activities on school campuses. So with that said, I can turn it over to any questions or discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Stallworth and company. Let's see, first of all, do we have any public comment on this, Jeannie?
No public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we're looking at primarily some editorial changes, it looks like here, to get things further into an alignment with the formatting that that we've adopted to for board policies. So looking for any questions, comments from the board. Of course, if there is a pleasure for a motion, we're looking for that as well. Trustee Church?
Thank you. Pardon me. So basically, if I interpret this mostly deals with student clubs, that kind of a thing, or just all activities? Pardon me again.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so going down to, I lost it, number 3, page 3, number 3. And this may be a question for legal, but help guide me through this. First of all, let's just say you have a club at Galena High School and a student from McQueen says, I really want to attend that club. You have chess club. I love chess. We don't have it. Is there anything that prohibits that student from attending? If I interpret it right, that student, it's stated in here, they have a right to attend that?
At this particular time here, it's up to the individual club. It depends on when that club is actually meeting. It's my understanding that when the clubs meet after school, if there are members from another school that want to participate, all they have to do is make contact with the principal, get clarification, get permission, and make sure they're following the guidelines and protocols to join the club. They can participate.
Great, great. And that's exactly what I favor. It just, because I've been studying clubs lately and they're not, everything kind of different and who has what. Then the next thing would be 3A. And then I want to talk about 3C. Who could be, I guess I'm wondering who could be precluded from a club. For example, if you had a Republican club or a Democrat club or a Libertarian club, and you're not a Democrat or Republican, although I guess they wouldn't be registered to vote at that point. But I mean, could anybody be precluded from joining a club as long as it wasn't based on those discriminatory factors?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't, you got to give me a better.
I would like to think not, but I would like to think that would be against our policies of welcoming and inclusion and endeavor. I would like to think so.
I would reference trustee Church. If you take a look at general rules and protocols, 3A on the top of page 3.
That's exactly what I'm looking at, but then you look at 3C, and it says membership shall be based on pre-established criteria. So if somebody, I can't think of a really good example off the top of my head, but so a student that didn't have one of those specific, class identifiers, race, color, creed, religion, but a club could say, no, you can't belong because of some other factor.
Well, I think that. Thank you. Wrong, Stallworth.
Bring that microphone over, sir, would you?
Coordinator
Thank you.
of activities. I think that the membership pre-established criteria is for specific aspects. For example, the Honor Society club. You have to have a 3.0 or better to be a member of that. Or to be in the Future Business Leaders of the America Club, you have to be involved in these 3 classes or one of those. So some of the criteria which pertains to specific memberships would prevent some kids from participating and being a member of. The Block H Club, if you don't have a varsity letter in a sport, you couldn't belong to the Block H Club if you didn't meet that criteria. So I think that's why that's there.
Okay, that makes sense. So theoretically, you could be excluded, but it would be for a very valid reason, and it couldn't be for a protected class. So I think I've got that. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Trustee Mayberry?
Thank you, Madam President. It's pretty straightforward. Thank you. A quick question, just kind of piggyback on what Trustee Church was saying. At least it triggered a thought. If you, say you attend Galena and they don't have the club that you want to go to, but they have the chess club at Damani. Can you join the Damani club? You can. Oh, okay, thank you.
As you said, that piggybacked on the earlier question of Trustee Church. No, it's piggyback. It's very, very clear. So, other questions, comments? If not, looking for a motion, if that's the pleasure of the board? Okay, go right ahead.
Okay, I'll try, see if I can mangle this.
Okay, if not, there's a cheat sheet in front of you.
Okay, so I move. This is 2.6, right?
This is 2.6, yes. Board Policy 5300. is
Okay,
really what
I
you wanna
move
call it.
to adopt proposed revisions to Board Policy 5300, student activities specifically to update formatting, clarify language, and reflect current practice to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval.
Well done, sir, for first
Second.
motion. Yes, second it.
It's an honor.
First motion by Trustee Mayberry, seconded by Dr. Nicolette. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? All right, the motion is carried. Let the record show that it is unanimous. Thank you. We're going to bring back agenda item 2.03. There's a correction that does need to be made. This is Board Policy 5105. Something, a correction needs to be made administratively that was being worked on administratively, didn't get completed. And so I'm going to ask Chief General Counsel to as I open this back up, because we can do this because it's the same meeting, as the chair, as Chief General Counsel, to explain the situation, and then ask the board to reconsider the item, and we will again have public comment on it. So Mr. Burns, you'll be able to, oh, he just walked out, but he got it. Yeah, okay. I told him, he went on, got it. He's good. He's good. He's getting the public comment card. Thank you, sir. Counsel?
As the board knows, and as we've talked about, as we've changed our processes related to board policy adoption. And what we do now is the chiefs will present it to legal. We have a rolling calendar. Legal then responds back to the chiefs and responds oftentimes on the document. And I think unfortunately, I didn't follow up with Ms. Russell or Ms. Ford or Deputy Superintendent Beiersdorf. And it is, if the way that I recommended this be drafted is that it's consistent with state law. First of all, state law has the requirements that are found under subparagraph 3, 1 through 7. My recommendation was, and this is the part where there was confusion and I never heard back from them, which meant I presume they were taking our advice, is that if you go to page 3, all of this language that I'm highlighting on the board, oh wait, I have to, hey, John, how come I can't get this on the stop share? Let me see if I can do it this way. Sorry, everyone. Technology is not my best thing. So what I have here is you see all of this that I'm highlighting. I actually suggested that all of that language be moved to a regulation. So the question is why? Well, because again, board policy is expressing the what and why we're doing what we're doing. And all of this language, if you read it closely, it's the how. And the how falls to the administrative regulation. So in this case, and you've seen this, we've done this with other board policies, it is our recommendation that you direct the superintendent to adopt an administrative regulation that includes these 7 things. These 7 things right here on page 1 and 2, which are then embodied in page all this gray language, page 3 and page 4. So that would be regulation type thing. So that is our recommendation from legal. I'm presuming you guys didn't see the note, and I apologize for that. That's my fault, or because we should have taken that out of there before we present it to the board. So.
No, and Deborah Beiersdorf, and we appreciate that, Chief General Counsel, and we concur.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's just make sure we're all clear. Okay, so let's make sure, can you take us through it? Just, remember, we're looking here, so you,
Right.
okay, so.
Right, so if I can draw your attention to the board, it is my recommendation and staff's recommendation that everything I'm highlighting in gray, and I'm just gonna do this to make it really look dramatic, we're gonna delete all of that. Now, it's deleted only for this purpose. It's all gonna get moved to the regulation, okay? But your policy, as we've discussed multiple times, is policies are the what and why. And if you really read this, these first 3 paragraphs with the subsection lay out the what and why. We're saying student uniforms may enhance a positive school climate by promoting student responsibility and self-discipline, add to a safe and respectful learning environment, and allow students and employees to focus attention on increasing student achievement. So basically what you're doing in that paragraph is you are establishing the reason that the district may adopt student uniforms. The next part, and this is required by state law, is that school uniforms must be site-based, and that's actually in the statute. So therefore, you're saying, here's what we're saying about student uniforms, and now we're telling our superintendent, this is how you're going to carry out the student uniform policy. You're going to allow there to be site-based policies. You're going to adopt appropriate clothing. The process for dissemination of the site-based policy, which is actually in state law. The process that you'll decide the process of how school uniforms will be sold, which to our public commenter cannot be for fundraising and things of that nature. The evaluation of the effectiveness of a site-based policy for school uniforms. Consequences for students that do not follow the site-based policy, which is our discipline, and any other provisions necessary for the implementation of this policy. And so the reason why you do it that way is because you, as the board, are managing, if you were to adopt these type of criteria at this level, you can't. We have 110 campuses, is that right? You, at this level, you can't adopt a policy that covers 110. So what you do is you say, here's the general rule, you go adopt, you meaning the superintendent, adopt the rules on how the different campuses are going to act. And then each campus has the opportunity to adopt its own policy consistent with the superintendent's reg. So this policy fits really nice that way. That's how legal recommends it. And again, the confusion from staff, all I can say is that's on me. I should have followed back up with Vanjie to make sure she was comfortable with our changes. I didn't, I own that, but this is our recommendation.
Thank you, counsel. I want to make it really clear. So the pieces that the part, is it from double I or from A down that you recommend we delete? Which is it? So that. the
Yeah,
board can
it's
see?
it's on page 3 from double I down. The majority of that, obviously, some of the language will have to be reshaped, but basically all of that's going to be moved over to the regulation.
All the way down to legal requirements.
All the way
because
down to legal
The other
requirements.
stuff was deleted anyway.
Yep, yep.
Desired outcomes was already deleted.
Yeah,
So for the
that's-
purposes of this conversation, legal's recommendation, and then staff concurs, Deputy Beisdorf, correct? That from double I down through
8.
8, which is now a 7 on here, right?
Yes.
Right? That be deleted because the intent behind that, it's up here on on page 1, flowing over a little bit into page 2, right? Under policy number 3, those 7 are the general, is would be our general direction to the superintendent. From double I down is the detail behind that. And then that detail, as we've been discussing, is not what belongs in the policy.
Right, exactly. And so everything from double I through 8 is already included in 1 through 7 of subparagraph 3.
Mhm.
That's just the meat on the bone, if you will, for another way of putting it.
Okay. Is that clear for everybody? Okay, so that's the desire to make that change, and we're looking for, do we need to officially reopen?
You did reopen the item.
I just thought that's all it
You
takes for me
re-
to just say it. to
Yeah,
open?
you as the chair can
Okay.
reopen the item, and then what would have to happen is you would have to have a motion to adopt the language as is, otherwise it's going to go forward as it already was.
Okay, so,
adopted
so
earlier.
to adopt this change, is what
Yeah,
we're looking for,
right,
much as I
yep.
thought. Before we do, I know you have a comment, trustee Church. Before we do, why don't we hear from Mr. Burns, our public commenter on this, if you would, sir, if we take our public comment
Mike
first.
Burns.
And I think it's important to mention, because I think this is what might help Mr. Burns, is that we adopt policies first and then regulations have to match the policy. And to the extent they're inconsistent, which you pointed out one in your email, that inconsistency is just wrong. The policy supersedes the inconsistency with the reg, just so you know.
So, well, that may help with this comment, because we know you ran out of time last time, and we really want to hear the rest of what it is that you have for us to consider. So, sir, you please go ahead.
Well, I was just going to point that out, and then my 3 minutes went out, but I was looking specifically at 7 other provisions necessary for the implementation of this policy. I was going to say that's a bad idea and give my reasons why, but it got caught, so that's good.
Okay.
And then no, that's about it.
Okay. All right. Well, we called it anyway, so that's good. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments and thanks for sticking around to make them. So thank you. Okay, now we'll bring it back here to the board. Trustee Church, why don't you slide that face shield down too, sir? Would you a little bit? Thank you. Thank you, sir.
I just wanted to confirm that the fact that there's substantial changes, we're still compliant with OML.
Yeah, that's actually just it's a deletion of that. The open meeting law says we're gonna consider this. We're still considering this, so it's no different. Okay, other questions, comments? Okay, hearing none, I'm looking for the pleasure of the board for a motion on that edit, that change, that deletion, I should say.
Sure, I had
Trustee
the
Smith?
original motion, so I just want to make sure that I do this
Okay.
right. So do I do the motion all over again with the noted changes per Chief General Counsel Rombardo?
Yeah, you
If
can
that's
do it that
acceptable.
way. That's fine.
Makes it easy.
For item 2.03, I move that the Board Policy Committee forwards the proposed revisions of Board Policy 5105, adoption of a site-based policy, to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval with the noted comments from Chief General Counsel Rombardo.
Thank you, trustee Smith. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Nicolette, I think you were the original motion of seconder, so great. Seeing no further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? All right, the motion's carried. The record show it is unanimous. Thank you, staff, for coming back in. We appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Lamarca, for making room for that. And now we'll go to our final agenda item, which is our final in terms of our board policies. Agenda item 2.07, discussion and possible action for preliminary adoption of proposed revisions of board policy 5650. Students, this is student suicide prevention. Very important, specifically to update formatting, clarify language, and reflect current practice to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And I guess we'll just start with you once again, Mr. Lamarca. It is your day, sir.
Thank you, President Taylor, Superintendent McNeil, members of the committee. For the record, Paula Marca, Chief Strategies Officer, and I'm joined by Keely Killian. She's within our counseling department, one of our counseling coordinators. Just a couple of very quick comments. This policy is consistent with strategic plan goal 5 around school climate and creating a secure and safe environment for our students. I do want to point out, like the substance abuse policy and that significant issue, this is a community-wide issue, one that we can solve or attempt to solve with our community partners. We have some very strong community partners. One in particular is the Children's Cabinet that Ms. Killian works with on a consistent basis. So with that, I will turn it over to her for comment.
Hi, good afternoon. Keely Killian, School Counseling Specialist, Counseling and Social Work Department. I'm just going to kind of recap some of the big changes we made here. A lot of these changes, just a note, we collaborated and consulted, as Dr. Lamarca said, with our community partners, our stakeholders, the Office of Suicide Prevention, specifically Misty Von Allen, and then our counselors and social workers in the district. We updated a lot of the vocabulary and language related to suicide. We thought that that was very important to present and clarify. And then a lot of this is also language that's consistent, has been kept consistent with the NRS. And there's been a shift in practice related to the idea of using risk assessments and the quantification of risk. So while we're not going to ever negate risk, the practice is really a shift toward looking at ideation and gathering information related to suicide on a continuum. And so in the original language here, there was quite a bit of language related to risk. And we'd like to move, towards a practice on a continuum and gathering information. We're still following the same protocols related to working with students and families. We always want to be able to help support families and give them as much information as possible, supervise and keep students safe, and provide resources for them. That's best practice. And I think everything else in here is pretty much, the same as it has been. There's a lot of changes. So that's all I have for you right now.
Okay, all right, thank you, Ms. Killian. Let's see if we have any public comment on this one.
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Let's bring it back here to the table. Looks like there's some updates as well as some formatting, language, some updates in terms of language as well. In this policy, looking for comments, questions, and certainly working towards a motion. Trustee Mayberry?
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you for bringing this forward. This is really important and important to me. I'm just, and I don't know really where this fits into a policy. Maybe it doesn't, but in some of the strategies, do you ever use peer support as a strategy? Other students talking to a student, some sort of intervention. I'm just curious about that.
So there are programs out there where students can be trained kind of in that model. So some schools have had a little bit of training. Right now, a lot of what we're using with students related to like evidence-based curriculum is really making sure students kind of know what to look for and how to help each other. And to do something with the information. So we kind of give them a lot of tips and tools related to that.
Let me add just briefly that you have a student advisory council and there's a student representative that sits on the regular board of trustees. The counseling department, children's cabinet has been working with the student advisory council on what you're discussing right now. A couple of the things that we do in schools is, and I think Ms. Killian was doing that today, is we do some signs of suicide prevention screening. And we have been providing some support to families under sort of the moniker of living ideation. And so there are some discussions with the Student Advisory Council about how living ideation or something similar to it might be used to help students and allow for that peer support to occur.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know the youth isn't always skilled like you are, of course, but I trust that at times they may be a useful tool, to the extent that they can be. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Mayberry. Want to go to the superintendent first?
Yes.
And
We'll go
I'll
to Dr. McNeil, then we'll go to Trustee Smith, and then Dr. Nicholas.
absolutely. Thank you very much, President Taylor. And I'll just add on to Dr. Lamarca and Ms. Killian. We would never, ever want to put a student in the position of having safety information. And so that training on how to approach a child, but then also making sure that they follow up and that they know how to follow up so that the other child who reported that information is given all of the supports in place as absolutely as immediate as possible.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Trustee Smith?
Thank you, President Taylor. I have a question on page 3. It's policy. And to be most specific, it's 3C. So page 3, policy 3C. It's the reference to the term justice involved. I was reading through this sentence and I didn't understand where those words fit. And maybe that's just a lack of understanding about what justice involved in homelessness. I mean, the homelessness I understand, but the justice involved part.
I believe that that section is just referring to factors that increase risk. And so we do know nationally, locally, that living in transition or being homeless, living under foster care, being involved with juvenile services are risk factors that help us know that a child might be at heightened risk.
Okay, so justice involved means a child that is in some degree of police or criminal justice. Okay, it was just the clarity around justice involved. I wasn't exactly sure what that meant. Thank you.
Thank you for going out that question, because I think there may be others, even if they're members in the public who are watching, they may not think about any kind of, because the untraditional housing also includes justice involved housing, but they may not have made that connection. So thank you for asking that. Trustee Nicolette?
Thank you for that, Trustee Smith. I had the same question. I even circled it, so thank you for that. This is more of a reflection, having had the honor of, I don't know how many years now, maybe 6 years, participating in Safe and Healthy Schools Commission. I will say that I know that that commission does excellent work in this area, and Misty Van Allen serves on there. And so I'm going to ask, I'm assuming that some of the input on some level you have gleaned from that hardworking group.
I don't have knowledge that we've worked with that group specifically related to the whole policy, but there are people within the group like Misty as a stakeholder who we've collaborated with and consulted with. So I may not have all of the knowledge. Catherine Loudon might, because this has been presented to multiple stakeholders. It's a great question. Thank you.
And thank you. Multiple stakeholders is really so important to me.
Let me just add that this specific policy hasn't been presented to the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission, but all of our programming and our partnership and our work in suicide prevention has on multiple occasions.
Thank you, Dr. Nicolette. And one thing I might add to consider, should this go to the board today and then receive preliminary approval when it appears on the board agenda, that we make sure that that group has the opportunity to weigh in during that 13-day public comment period, so that they've had just an additional opportunity. I mean, it sounds like some people on that committee have been involved with staff and so on anyway, like you mentioned, Missy, but that way, just as another layer to make sure that they have a chance to put their eyes on it, so. All right, thank you. Other comments with Trustee Church?
Just a very quick comment this time. Page 3, section 3B, I just want to point out that substance abuse, meaning drug use or alcohol, is a major factor in suicide. So I definitely want to point that out.
Thank you, Trustee Church. Seeing no other comments, looking for a motion if it's the pleasure of the board. Looks like Trustee Mayberry's on the roll, so we'll go right to you, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, I'll move to approve the adoption of proposed revisions of Board Policy 5650, student suicide prevention, specifically to update formatting, clarifying language, and reflect current practice to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval.
Thank you, Trustee Mayberry. There's a motion. Is there a second? Okay, seconded by Trustee Smith. We've had plenty of discussion, seeing no more. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? All right, the motion is carried. Let the record show that it is unanimous, which means 5 of us today. Thank you so much, Ms. Killian and Dr. LaMarca. We appreciate your work on this really important issue. Okay, agenda item 3, we'll go to any closing public comment items, Jeannie?
Jeremiah Smith.
Mr. Smith, right there, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's my first time in a public comment, so
It's
please
okay.
forgive me.
So right, no, it's all good. You pull that mic up here a little so you don't have to bend down as much and.
Yeah, so
Right.
I just like to bring up what I see as probably a practice within the district that is a counter, I guess, to the strategic plan and non-discrimination policy. Specifically, the prohibition of exchange students within the district, at least temporary prohibition of exchange students in the district. I think this is a disservice to the students who are currently in the school system, and particularly disservice to the exchange students who are in the area, specifically mine. Unable to have children, this is kind of a way that I've been able to, be a parental figure to our young people, and personally benefiting from world travel and exposure to different cultures. I think it's extremely important. Particularly for the community. And so past efforts to try to, get this resolved, presumably due to COVID, have been unsuccessful. So I just wanted to bring this up into public comment that we're excluding, people, particularly in the non-discrimination policy of national origin, who are supported by, Code of Federal Regulations, Title 22, Part 514. So they're allowed here, and they're a member of my family, a tax-paying member for the school district. I think it's unjust at this point. My exchange student is vaccinated. She's been here for more than 2 weeks, and she's, I think, really missing out on an opportunity to commingle with American culture, like true American culture. And I would just like to express my concern publicly, and hope that this practice can be reversed or stopped, so that the people, particularly overseas, who have invested so much money and time, who've invested their trust in me to take care of their children, really get the maximum benefit from it. So that's really all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any other public comment, Jeannie? Jeff Church. Thank you.
Timer. I don't think I'll need 3 minutes. Good afternoon, everyone, fellow trustees. Since we don't have board reports, this is basically board reports. And it's all good. Number one, I just want to report that myself and other trustees attended the Nevada Association of School Board Conference up at South Lake Tahoe, not to be confused with the National School Board Association. That brought together trustees and other professionals from across the state. And it was a very good meeting, very well done, very informative. And I think we're going to see some trickle down to the board from that. I also have a handout that I gave. Hopefully you got it. It's kind of cute, but it just kind of states that sometimes we look at the same data and we reach different conclusions. There's no right, there's no wrong. And it's just a matter of opinion many times. It's not misinformation. And I think the board's moving in the right direction. I'm really, really positive in my hopes for the board that we're not going to be in the front page of the paper as much as we were. I really believe the board is a cohesive board. We have new board members, and I'm just very optimistic. And I want the public to know that. And I want the public to know that I don't support criticism of individual board members. If you have a criticism of a policy or something, that's great, but I prefer we keep it in that direction. Very minor. I'd like to see the Pledge of Allegiance return to board reports, to the board policy meeting, since we are essentially a board meeting in that capacity. And then also, I believe we're going to have on the agenda in the near future a discussion of this particular board committee. I haven't formed a final opinion, but I really think we need to look at the makeup of the committee. Does it have to be board members? Because it wasn't, as I understand it, in the past, because anything we do here comes back to the board, goes back out for 13 days or 15 days of public comment, then comes back to the board again. So it seems a little bit redundant, and it takes away from our valuable time that could be spent on quality of education or other purposes. And again, I haven't made a final decision on that, but I just believe we should have some discussion of that. Included in that discussion might be that the board members would have the opportunity to delegate attendance. So if somebody wanted to attend the board meeting, policy meeting, great. if somebody wants to delegate a representative from their district to attend, that might be another option. So anything's on the table, but I just feel really positive, and I wanted to share that with both the board and the public, since we're not meeting for another week or so. I really, really felt good about the conference that we attended and about the communication that I have with the board, and hopefully others feel that same way. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Church. Okay, no further public comment, Jeannie?
No, that's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next meeting, we do not have a board policy committee meeting in December, not traditionally. I think we are having one in December, aren't we? We are having one. That's right. We are, because we have some stuff we need to get done. So our next meeting is on December 14th. Yes, it's on December 14th, and then we are adjourned until then. Thank you, everybody.